introduce from Sydney, Ibrahim al-Badawi, the founder and CEO of OneGov in the UAE and Australia. You'll be telling us about the GovTech and COVID-19 scene in the Middle East, which we are eager to know about. And we know well that the Emirati capital, Abu Dhabi, ranked #1 on various areas of COVID management. So please go ahead.
That's true. Thank you so much, Carl. And hi, everyone. In the next few minutes, I would like to share with you insights about GovTech and COVID in the Middle East, basically how governments and societies leverage technology to navigate the pandemic. This is basically from the work we have been doing with governments, but also from our through our platforms in which we kind of keep an eye on how technology is being used across the Middle East. I would like to establish a context here first. And in this context, I would like to highlight one key fact that the Middle East, especially the Arab states, shouldn't be considered one homogeneous kind of block. These countries vary a lot. I'm talking about the Arab countries that spread across West Asia and North Africa. And they vary according to many measures that include the political and socio-economic context, but also the progress and maturity of digital government programs, digital divide, sometimes within even the same country. This is a chart, can be very helpful, even a bit complicated might be, from the United Nations e-Government Survey 2020. In this survey, we measure the progress of e-government programs from around the world. And we divide countries according to their national income level, measured by GDP. The Arab countries can be found across all these levels. From one side, you have the countries that are with high income. That includes the 6 Gulf Cooperation Council countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. And then you have all the way countries that are identified as low income, like Somalia, and then in between. And there is a level of correlation between the level of national income and the progress made by government in using technology to deliver online services, as measured by the Online Service Index. You can think of innovation as well. According to the Global Innovation Index, among the top 60 countries, we got only one Arab country, that's United Arab Emirates. You might think of open government. There are 3 Arab states that are members of the Open Government Innovation, Tunisia, Morocco, and Jordan. So it's kind of a very rich context and very diverse. That's important to consider. However, throughout the pandemic, 2020 and now 2021, just like many other countries around the world, governments and societies have been leveraging technology, doing their best to navigate the pandemic in many ways. Technology has been used to share information and counter misinformation, the infodemic, also apply some COVID measures like social distancing, contact tracing, enable the shift towards remote work, remote education, and service delivery. I'm not talking about the immediate government services, but even grocery delivery, laundry, the services that needed by the public to go on by their life with minimum disruption, and now the vaccine administration. I would like here to give you some, let's say, specifics, to share 4 stories quickly, or 4 case studies, and then conclude by sharing some common collective insights or takeaways. Let me start from the United Arab Emirates. This is one of the key stories that happened in the early days of the pandemic. In the United Arab Emirates, as you might know, government departments have designated title Chief Innovation Officer, where their job is to promote innovation in the government. So in the early days, I'm talking about March, end of March, early April 2020, when the lockdown was imposed and government shifted to remote work, we reached out to Chief Innovation Officer in key ministry, the Ministry of Energy, Ms. Hal Mary. And we talked to her about how is she gonna continue innovating from home, not only working from home, how to move innovation labs and other practices online. So we ended up designing and delivering together the first virtual innovation lab in the Middle East, in which participants from federal and local governments came together, and we tried to figure out, that was just an experiment. How are we gonna keep innovating remotely in this new era? That lab was highly promoted. This is a screenshot of the website of the Emirates News Agency, the official news agency. It's also captured globally. This is a story published at Apolitical in the United Kingdom. And because of the value you have seen, we captured what we learned together with the government in a document sharing 7 principles we consider essential for government agencies to design and deliver innovation labs. Moving on to another technology, another use, but it's still in the UAE, the police department in Dubai leveraged AI and introduced smart helmets. Basically, these are helmets provided to members of the police force to be able to detect people who might be infected with the virus from safe distance. So the technology, the helmets are enabled with technologies like thermal camera, face recognition, also the ability to recognize vehicle plate numbers. Now, this is very important when it comes to managing crowds, especially in a city like Dubai, a city known for mega events, like the events happening nowadays, actually, Dubai Expo 2020. And when you think about this technology from being one of the fourth industrial revolution, the emerging technologies, we can see other Arab states use robots and drones, like in Qatar and Tunisia, to manage crowds, to spread information, and so on. Another story from Jordan this time, tracing apps. This is an app that's developed by the government and deployed, and the main job is to trace COVID. And then whenever someone is infected, the app job is to identify people who might got in touch with that person. It follows a similar framework, technical framework we have seen in apps like Tracing Together in Singapore, presented to us a few minutes ago in this panel. And it uses the same kind of technologies in tracking location and storing data locally, at least at the user phone. And this kind of technology we have seen in many countries bring up the conversation around where to draw the line between using technology to manage the virus while also respecting, maintaining the privacy information of the individual. Similar apps have been deployed in many countries, including Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar. And I can see we have representatives from these countries, so we might be able to hear more specific details from their context. I will come back to this app and in my last part of my presentation to talk more about the part related to culture and ethics when it comes to use of technology, which is I can say that's highly important when we talk about COVID technology. And then this is one of my favorite stories from the Middle East during this era. In Oman, a startup, Innotech, that had been doing 3D printing for education purposes before COVID, quickly shifted its focus from education and research into manufacturing equipments, basically PPE that is needed by the hospitals and local authorities in Oman locally. That was a very innovative approach. We have seen similar stories in Europe, in Italy mainly, and other places, but that was the key story when it comes to the use of 3D printing in the Middle East. I like this story for several reasons. But first, let's highlight what it actually does. As I said, this startup has a history of using 3D printing, but then we know that in the early days of the pandemic, April, May, there was a global disruption for the supply chain. And many countries, including Oman, had to deal with that sudden disruption in the supply of PPE. Hence, Innotech, the startup, saw the opportunity and the need for help, and then shifted its, let's say, its manufacturing capabilities into healthcare and PPE gears. So it started manufacturing gear like face shields and ventilators and so on. The entire 3D printing process had been done locally, which, as you can imagine, enabled innovation, collaboration between the startup, public sector, mainly health care related agencies, and also created more jobs. Again, when we put 3D printing in the context of the fourth industrial revolution and emerging technologies, we can see other practices in other places across the Middle East, UAE, Qatar, but also Tunisia. Now, as I said, we have seen cases in innovation, shifting to remote work, remote education, use of AI, 3D printing, tracing app, and so on, with various levels of success in these countries. However, collectively, we have seen some success factors. We have seen some common challenge between these countries, and also we learned some lessons. I would like to wrap up my talk by sharing what I consider the most important 5 lessons probably in this context, the context of GovTech in handling the panic. Number 1 is the collaboration between government and the startup sector, especially the GovTech sector, has proven to be very, very valuable. The Oman story is just one story. In 01Gov, our collaboration with government agencies enabled the shift into remote innovation and other good practices as well. This GovTech startup sector globally, the size of it exceeds $450 billion according to numbers from 2018, and it's picking up now actually. However, it's still kind of emerging in the Arab states. When we closed the round of investment last year, we have been told by media outlets that focusing on investment and startup that 01Gov is probably the only startup in the entire Arab world that labels itself clearly as GovTech startup. So this is one thing we might need to consider, more innovation, more collaboration. I like how Dr. Andrea from Italy touched upon this in the context of G20 and Europe. The second takeaway or lesson here is that when we adopt such advanced technologies, we need to consider the local context, mainly culture and socioeconomic situation as well. With the rise of machine, with the rise of AI, with the rise of algorithm, there is an interesting conversation happening now between technology and then values. When we talk about vaccine nowadays, I'm talking to you from Australia, but following what's happening from around the world, we've seen in some places with high level of individualism culture, let's say, there's high concern from the public on their rights towards approaching issues like lockdown and vaccine mandate. While in other culture where there is the society might lean towards adopting measures that is good for the collective good, people might be more relaxed toward accepting such measure. I'm not indicating any preference here. I'm just saying that we need to consider that culture and values exist, and then we need to be thoughtful about approaching technology in this context. The third point I would like to highlight here is that communication and transparency is essential between government and public. We witness government agencies in the UAE, for example, and also global organizations like OECD, World Health Organization, leveraging new trendy platform like TikTok to talk to specific segments in the country. And that's essential. I would also highlight that it's not only about the technology, but also the technique. Storytelling has proven to be a very effective way to talk to the public because it's the most human way to talk to people as storytelling. Number 4 is the investment in human capital and digital infrastructure. In the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, we have seen a high level of success in the shift towards remote work, remote education. And the main reason, in my opinion, is that these countries have been investing heavily over the past 3 decades in building the digital infrastructure and investing in human capital. And now we see they are harvesting actually this investment. So it's always smart investment to invest in human capital. Again, we are getting into more sophisticated, more advanced technologies, which means we need to invest more even in enabling the public sector servants with the skill they need, but also educating the public on how these technologies might be leveraged for the collective good and how they can be part of it. Finally, leadership. It's obvious now that leadership matters. We have seen countries from around the world, for good and bad, how leadership shape their destiny when it comes to COVID. This goes beyond technology, beyond GovTech, but it's essential when it comes to technology. Technology can be really attractive. Buzzwords like blockchain and AI and smart contracts can be really, really attractive for government to apply. But as I said, it's a matter of making smart choices on what technology to adopt. It's a matter of remembering that we're doing this for the good of the people, that the government has a job to enable the citizen to have good life, especially in the pandemic now. And now we're talking about emerging from pandemic, what kind of future we want for our societies. So this is a conversation that requires leadership. Without leadership, it would be really, really hard to make use of technologies to achieve the common goals we aspire as society.